Hello, and welcome to American Literature Week 1. Sorry about the first video if you did watch it. I had some sound issues with my computer. Hopefully now you can hear me correctly. So this week we'll be completing the following tasks. First, you need to purchase your book, The Norton Anthology of American Literature. We'll be reading from volumes A and B, and you can either use the 8th or the 9th edition. You can get this book at the bookstore, or you can buy it online, or you can even just purchase the ebook. But here's the catch. You need to be able to take notes, and I'll be talking about that later in this lecture. Next, and those of you who are watching this lecture, you're already a step ahead, make sure you watch this week's lecture. It's called Introduction to the Course and What is American Literature. Third, you're going to read 3 texts from our textbook. And then you're going to participate in this week's discussion, our first discussion forum, which I'll talk about later in this lecture. So just how do you reach me? I'm your professor and I'm here to help you. So if you're lost, you have questions, or you just want to chat about American literature, it's one of my favorite things in the world to talk about. So reach out to me. My name is Dr. Iris Jamal Dunkel. You can call me Dr. Dunkel. My office hours are Mondays and Wednesdays. I'll be on campus. I'll also be there on Tuesdays and Thursdays, between 12:30 and 3 on Mondays and 12:30 and 2 on Wednesdays. But you can also make an appointment to meet with me. I'm in 1031H, and my phone number is listed below. However, right now I am on bereavement leave. I'm only teaching this class for the next 3 weeks, so please know that you won't find me on campus, but you can still talk to me and set up appointments. The best way to reach me is via email, or I did provide my cell phone number if you need to reach me, because I am not checking this phone number for the next 3 weeks. So what will you learn this semester? This course offers you a survey of American literature, all the way up through the Civil War, and it will include pre-colonial, colonial, Enlightenment, and Romantic texts of diverse writers, and those will be written in all genres. Literary movements are explored as they reflect the social, historical, political, religious, philosophical, economic, cultural, and artistic issues of the United States, past and present. You will be taking written exams, and you'll be writing critical papers where you'll be doing some research. In order to pass this class, you need to do the 2 things on the right. Demonstrate through explication, that means through an interpretation, that means looking at texts, understanding them, and using content from those texts to write papers or essays, and or analysis of understanding of American literature and literary movements up through the Civil War, including the influence of canonical and non-canonical writers. You also need to do this demonstrate through explication, interpretation, and or analysis a basic understanding of historical context, cultural influences, and major themes informing early American literature up through the Civil War. So if you do those 2 things, you will pass this class no problem. As I already talked about, you need the Norton Anthology of American Literature. You need that this week, okay? You have to get your book this week. You should also have access to a grammar and usage book, whatever you use for your English 120, or an MLA handbook. You can also use the online Al Purdue website. I'll put a link to that up on our Canvas site. You can also visit the Writing Center located in room 832. They have great handouts on MLA formatting. That's what we'll be writing our papers in this semester. You're required to weekly check in, at least weekly check in with our Canvas page. On Mondays, late in the day, I will be posting the lecture. It will be on the home page, and it will have, in addition to the lecture, you'll see all of the assignments that will be due for that week, what you need to read, what discussion forums you need to be a part of, and if there's a paper due or there's an exam coming up. It's your responsibility to keep up to date with all of this information. If you do not show up for class online for 2 weeks, you will be dropped from the class. If something happens and you can't attend, just like you were in a face-to-face class, you need to talk to me. Send me an email or come see me in office hours. Usually the number one reason why people fail any online class is because they don't take the time they would in a face-to-face class. So if I were teaching you this class in person, you would expect to spend about 10 hours a week on this class. You should also expect to spend 10 hours a week on this class, even though we are online. And I really encourage you to stop by my office hours when I'm on campus, or to reach out to me directly if you have any questions, but also just to stop by and chat about the texts. Some of them are really fascinating texts, and I would love to talk about them with you. If you are late on an assignment, you will lose. It may not be accepted, but you lose 10% of your grade for every day that it's late. So make sure you turn your assignments in on time. And finally, harassment of any kind, either implied, written, oral, or physical, toward any member of the class or the instructor will not be tolerated. Plagiarism, I'm pretty sure by this point you all know that plagiarism is not a good idea. If you plagiarize a paper in this course, you will automatically fail that paper. If you do it twice, you fail the class. If you need accommodations, please make sure you reach out to the Learning Resource Center. The information is here so that I can accommodate you as much as you need within this course. In this class, you'll have 2 different grading areas. You'll be graded for participation, and you'll be graded for your essays and exams. The essays, there will be 3 formal essays in this class. You will be doing discussion forums and other types of assignments like journal entries where you have to do reflective responses about the different texts that we're reading. And you'll have 2 formal midterms and finals, which will include short answers and multiple choice, but also an essay question. To receive, you have to write your essays in MLA format, as I mentioned. Here's information on how to visit the Writing Success Center on campus, or how to use our online tutoring program called Smart Thinking. It's free to all students, and there's instructions on how to log in right here. I encourage all of you to use Smart Thinking. In fact, on several assignments, you will be required to use it. I'm going to skip this slide because I'm going to come back to it in a second. So let's talk why study American literature. That's your class. That's what we're going to be talking about the rest of the semester. Now, the first reason is to really understand the historical value of these texts. You're going to be reading about people who are living in the 1400s. Now, that's a long time ago. And the best way to understand the perspective of what it was like to be an early explorer, or what it was like to be a Native American when those early explorers showed up, is to read these texts. That's the closest we have to a first-hand account. By reading them, we will better understand our history because we'll look at multiple sides, not just one side written down. You can also read these texts in order to understand cultural value. Who was in power at the time? Who was valued? Which voice did we culturally value more than the other voices during this time period? Another reason why you should study American literature is because as human beings, we love to hear and tell stories. Think about the way you communicate something that's happened to you. Oftentimes, it won't just be facts and figures. You'll tell a story in order to communicate something if it's a significant thing that's happened to you. And advertisers, they use stories to make you connect with something, to make you want to buy it, right? Telling a good story is a really good way to communicate some of the things that are almost impossible to communicate. And the final reason is because literature acts as a map. It tells us about America. It tells us about what we call America, what was here before us. It can help us understand what might happen after us. It gives us a first-hand account of what it was like to live in these different times. So what does it mean when we say, quote, American literature? When we talk about American literature, and I'm putting air quotes around that, we're talking about literature of the United States. But it also has to do with, and we have to really think about, what does it mean? What does the United States mean? Some questions you can ask is, does it take place in America or the United States? And I want you to ask these questions about I want you to think about all these questions holistically as we go throughout the semester. Is the author American? And what makes someone American? What themes, ideas, values, experiences, and purposes seem to represent American literature? How has U.S. history influenced the type of stories that we tell or the characters we create and or remember in the canon? By canon, I don't mean something that fires cannonballs. I mean a collective of literature that we see as something that represents America. And believe me, the canon is something that is continually being revised and rethought through, especially in the last 20 years. What kind of writing does the American literary canon consist of? And what can we learn from examining and thinking about those texts? Now, when you read individual texts, I want you to actively read these texts. And what that means is I want you to take notes while you're reading. The first thing I want you to think about before you even start reading is when and where was this text written. Then I want you to ask, what genre is the text? Is it nonfiction? Is it true, right? Is it fiction? Is it made up? Is it a story? Is it poetry? And usually you can tell when something is poetry because it has line breaks or it has different types of meter. Or is it drama? Is it written as a play? What is the title? And then what does that title tell you? What do you predict the text will be about by looking at the title? Who wrote the text? And remember, why did he or she write this text? And if you don't know something about the person who wrote it, remember to read that background information about the author that you see before the text is there. Those are required reading. You must read those because they're really going to help you understand the text in a better context. Why do you think he or she wrote the text? Now, after you've read through, why do you think the author wrote this text? What was the purpose? What is the author trying to communicate through the text? Is there an underlying meaning or subtext? What other writings has the author drawn upon in order to write this text? Because all texts speak to one another, right? What text is this text talking back to? And what other text has this influenced? What phrases, passages stick out to you and why? Make sure you circle them or highlight them. Tell yourself why they're important. What symbols or reoccurring themes do you find in this text? In what ways is this text valuable? I want you to really think about that because there are some texts that you'll read in this class and you'll be like, oh my gosh, that was so boring, right? Know that if it's in this book, if it's been saved for hundreds of years, there's a reason for that. And it's your job to figure that out or for us to work out why, even if it's really, really boring, why is it still there? What can we learn from this text? Finally, make sure there's going to be a lot of words in this book that you do not understand. And I want you to circle those words and look them up and then write the meaning of the words in your actual text. That will help you as you go back through the text because you will be rereading some of these texts several times. So your reading assignment for this week is to actively read, that means taking notes while you're reading, the following stories. The Navajo creation story found on pages 25 through 34. The Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca, excuse my pronunciation, found on pages 43 through 51. And Anne Bradstreet's bio, which is on page 207, and her poem Before the Birth of One of Her Children, on pages 225 to 226. Now remember, when you read a poem, you should read it several times, not just one time. Your assignment is going to be after you've actively read those texts and after you've listened to this lecture, I want you to try to use the skills that I just talked about to look at these three texts. The first one, the Navajo creation story, is representative of the indigenous tribal voices that peopled the land are now contained by the United States. This story evolved over generations via the oral tradition, even before European explorers came into contact with the Americas. Then, Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca's account is about his time in the American Southwest. It was published in 1542, and it's he was one of four survivors of a colonial expedition. Cabeza de Vaca and his colleagues wandered the Southwest for 8 years until meeting up with Spanish colonial contacts in Mexico City. His writing is representative of the age of exploration, though through territory known known now now occupied by the United States. Sorry for the typos. And then finally, Anne Bradstreet, her poem Before the Birth of One of Her Children is one of her more well-known poems, published in 1650. She was born in England, and she became a member of the Puritan settlement in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The poem is representative of early colonial settlement in the area now known as the United States. So this discussion forum is meant as an informal conversation to get us comfortable talking about the text. Let's start with these three. What do you make of them? Which is your favorite? Why? What do you like about them? What don't you like about them? And try to be very specific here. Any particular images or ideas or motifs that you were struck by in your reading of the text? What do you make of the text as, quote, American literature? Do you think one of these best fits the idea of American lit? Why? What are the implications for an idea of American literature based on these three texts? In your replies, you can speak to a single text or all of the texts. There will only be a single thread for this discussion, which we will all respond and reply to. Please post an initial response where you introduce yourself to the class. Remember, we don't know you yet. You got to say who you are. Then answer the above questions about the text. Please include quotations from the text to support your points. Your initial post should be at least 200 to 300 words. That's about a page long. Then write at least 3 in-depth responses to your peers' posts. Try not just to praise what he or she said. Instead, try to write responses that extend the conversation to consider more questions and or ideas or answers.